Welcome to Mr. Giant Reacts a Ting and Ting and Ting. I'm Mr. Giant back with another video for you. And some people wanted me to do a video on where I'm from, which is Grenada in the Caribbean. Some people think it's Jamaica, but it's not. It's Grenada. Okay, so I decided to do a new video about the history of Grenada, one that might be a little bit more in-depth than I have reacted to before. I do have a playlist of Grenada things that I have reacted to, and I'll leave it in one of the pop-ups so that you could go watch all that you can on Grenada there. But this one is called History of Grenada, so and this one seems to go through the process of things. So let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer and see what the history of my island is about.
The history of islands of Grenada and the Caribbean, part of the Lesser Antilles group of islands, covers a period from the earliest human settlements to the establishment of the contemporary.
Okay, he said islands to begin with. So Grenada is 3 islands in one. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. That's why he's referring to it as islands. So it's like a 3-island state. All right, let's get going here.
Nation state of Grenada. First settled by indigenous peoples, by the time of European contact it was inhabited by the Caribs. British colonists killed most of the Caribs on the island and established plantations on the island, eventually importing African slaves to work on the sugar plantations. Control of the island was disputed by Great Britain and France in the 18th century, with the British ultimately prevailing. In 1795, Fédon's rebellion, inspired by the Haitian Revolution, very nearly succeeded, taking significant military intervention to quell. Slavery was abolished in 1833, and in 1885, the island's capital.
I don't know why they have train tracks there, but we don't have trains on the island. We never did, as far as I know. So I don't know where that picture is, but that ain't Grenada.
St. George's became the capital of the British Windward Islands. Grenada achieved independence from Britain in 1974. Following a coup by the Marxist New Jewel movement in 1979, the island was invaded by United States troops and the government overthrown. The island's major crop, nutmeg, was significantly damaged by Hurricane Ivan in 2004. Early history. Approximately 2 million years ago, Grenada was formed by volcanic activity which then resulted in land formation. The earliest potential evidence for human presence on Grenada comes from the
Okay, that picture looked like it was taken during the revolution. My goodness, it's black and white. I'm old.
Increase of charcoal particulates and the decline of arboreal pollen from the original climax forests, around 3760 to 3525 BC, during the Archaic Age. This evidence remains controversial, as it could be natural. Several shell fragments from archaeological sites have been dated 1700 to 1380 BC, but are from mixed, insecure contexts. More secure are the shell middens at Point Salines, dated between 765 to 535 BC. None of these dates are associated with definitively human artifacts, however. The earliest human-made artifacts that have been scientifically dated are from early ceramic age settlements at Bosure and Pearls. Only one other known site may have been occupied during this time as well. Beginning around AD 750.
Okay, I'm gonna straight up tell you, I think he's butchering the names. He said Bosure. I think it's actually pronounced Bosheju. I think that's what he means. He said Bosure. So, as you could tell, the voice may be AI generated, but that's okay. I'll correct it as we go on.
The Amerindian population began to rise, probably as a result of continued migration from the South American mainland. Most of the 87 pre-Columbian sites identified in Grenada have a component during this period, marking the height of Grenada's indigenous population. This period also represents major cultural and environmental changes throughout the Caribbean. Several waves of groups arrived in prehistory, often associated with Arawakan or Caravan languages, but linguistic reconstruction has shown the Caravan dialect to be fragmentary, the primary language family being Arawak.
Okay, he's saying Arawak and Caravan. Nah, it's Arawak and Carib. C-A-R-I-B. There's no B-A-N at the end of that.
Wakan. Christopher Columbus reportedly sighted the island on his third voyage in 1498, but he did not land and the name he gave was never used. By the 1520s, it was known as La Grenada, after the recently conquered city in Andalusia. By the beginning of the 18th century, the name La Grenade in French was in common use, eventually anglicized to Grenada. Partly because of indigenous resistance, Grenada remained uncolonized for nearly 150 years after Columbus passed by. When the French finally settled Grenada in 1649, there were at least two separate indigenous groups, Carib in the north and Galabais in the southeast. Evidence suggests the Galabais were more recent arrivals from the mainland, whereas the group the French called Carib were living in villages that had been continuously occupied for over millennium, per archaeological evidence. That is, the indigenous names were somewhat reversed in Grenada. The people the French called Caribs were likely descendants of the earliest peoples on Grenada, whereas the Galabais appear to have been more recent arrivals from the mainland. 17th century.
Okay. The Galabais? I'll be honest with you, that's the first I've heard of that. I'm gonna have to do some research on that because we have always told that the two main groups on the island were the Arawaks and the Caribs. And it was purported that the Caribs were warlike and they would capture and conquer the Arawaks, and one of their beliefs were that if they eat the flesh of their like the people they capture, that would make them stronger. Of course, who wrote the history? So yeah, you see, before when I was told that, I was like, oh my god. But now that I see whoever writes history writes it to make the people that are there look not so good. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but then you have to question it now, because in order to justify the genocide or extinction of them, they probably had to come up with something, and they come up with that, oh, they're savages, they're good riddance to them, they were eating people.
English attempted settlement. In June 1609, the first attempt at settlement by Europeans was made by an English expedition of 24 colonizers led by Mossy's Godfrey, Hull, Lull, and Robinson, who arrived in the ships Diana, the Penelope, and the Endeavour. The settlement was attacked and destroyed by the indigenous islanders and many tortured and killed. The few survivors were evacuated when the ships returned on December 15, 1609. French settlement and conquest. On March 17, 1649, a French expedition of 203 men from Martinique, led by Jacques d'Isle du Parquet, who had been the governor of Martinique on behalf of the Compagnie des Isles de l'Amérique since 1637, landed at St. George's Harbor and constructed a fortified settlement, which they named Fort Annunciation. A treaty was swiftly agreed between du Parquet and the indigenous chief Kairouan to peacefully partition the island between the two communities. Du Parquet returned to Martinique, leaving his cousin Jean Lecomte as governor of Grenada. Conflict broke out between the French and the indigenous islanders in November 1649, and fighting lasted for 5 years until 1654, when the last opposition to the French on Grenada was crushed. Rather than surrender, Kairouan and his followers chose to throw themselves off a cliff, a fact celebrated in the poetry of Jan Carew. The island continued for some time after.
Okay, there's a memorial for where the natives jumped off. It's called Leaper's Hill, and it's like a precipice that they all jumped off. Like pretty much a whole colony of the natives jumped off, so that they don't get captured. Because if they were captured, they would have been enslaved or worse. You know what I mean? So they just leapt to the death. I don't think I've ever been there. I probably have, but I probably was really young when I went there. But it's there, and I do believe it's close to a place called Sauteuse, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me right.
After to suffer raids by war canoe parties from St. Vincent, whose inhabitants had aided the local Grenadian islanders in their struggle and continued to oppose the French administration. On 27th of September 1650, du Parquet bought Grenada, Martinique, and St. Lucia from the Compagnie des Isles de l'Amérique, which was dissolved, for the equivalent of £1,160. In 1657 Du Parquet sold Grenada to Jean de Faudois, Comte de Serillac for the equivalent of £1,890. In 1664, King Louis XIV bought out the independent island owners and established the French West India Company. In 1674 the French West India Company was dissolved. Proprietary rule ended in Grenada, which became a French colony as a dependency of Martinique. In 1675, Dutch privateers captured Grenada, but a French man of war arrived unexpectedly and recaptured the island. 18th century. French.
No, let's look at this here. This is the thing about history. History teaches us that we're not that different. Like, everybody's got their historical events that happen. Their catastrophic events that cause a group of people to disappear, or a group of people to be enslaved, or something like that. Which brings back to the point that I'm always making, that we as far as the human experience is concerned, we're not that different. Or we're not different at all. You know what I mean? We keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And everybody think they're doing something that's different. And they're not so much that they're doing something different, but they're doing something that's going to make a better life. But it's usually a better life for a certain section of the people that's there. You know what I mean? They're just out there. They got rid of the Native American, the natives, I should say. And then they're just buying and selling the island like nobody's business. You know what I mean? It's like, that's just crazy, you know? Somebody was already there. But you go in there and wipe them out, and then just start selling the stuff, and acting like you own the place. You know what I'm saying? That's just crazy.
French colony. In 1700, Grenada had a population of 257 whites, 53 coloreds, and 525 slaves. There were 3 sugar estates, 52 indigo plantations, 64 horses, and 569 head of cattle. Between 1705 and 1710 the French built Fort Royal at St. George's, which is now known as Fort George. The collapse of the sugar estates and the introduction of cocoa and coffee in 1714 encouraged the development of smaller land holdings, and the island developed a landowning yeoman farmer class. In 1738 the first hospital was constructed. British colony. Grenada was captured by the British during the 7 Years' War on March 4, 1762 by Commodore Swanton without a shot being fired. Grenada was formally ceded to Britain by the Treaty of Paris on February 10.
Now this is an old picture, but the port of St. George's that they talk about, this is that picture on there, this is where it is. Hopefully they have a little more modern rendition of it. And some of these buildings, or maybe a couple of them, are still standing, or I haven't been there in a while, they may have been demolished. This is the area where all my siblings and I were born, in this area right here.
1763. In 1766 the island was rocked by a severe earthquake. In 1767 a slave uprising was put down. In 1771 and again in 1775 the town of St. George, which was constructed solely of wood, was burnt to the ground, after which it was sensibly rebuilt using stone and brick. France recaptured Grenada between 2 July 4, 1779 during the American War of Independence, after Comte d'Estaing stormed Hospital Hill. A British relief force was defeated in the naval battle of Grenada on July 6, 1779. However, the island was restored to Britain with the Treaty of Versailles 4 years later on September 3, 1783. In 1784 the first newspaper, the Grenada Chronicle, began publication. Pheidon's Rebellion. Julian Pheidon, a mixed-race owner.
That's Julian Pheidon. Julian Pheidon.
Of the Belvedere estate in the St. John parish, launched a rebellion against British rule on the night of March 2, 1795, with coordinated attacks on the towns of Grenville, La Baye, and Gouieve. Pheidon was clearly influenced by the ideas emerging from the French Revolution, especially the Convention's abolition of slavery in 1794. He stated that he intended to make Grenada a black republic just like Haiti. Pheidon and his troops controlled all of Grenada except the parish of St. George's, the seat of government, between March 1795 and June 1796. During those insurgent months 14,000 of Grenada's 28,000 slaves joined the revolutionary forces in order to write their own emancipation and transform themselves into citizens. Some 7,000 of these self-liberated slaves would perish in the name of freedom. The British defeated Pheidon's forces in late 1796, but they never caught Pheidon himself, and his fate is unknown. 19th century.
Now check the vibe out. Pheidon was like a real clever guy, you know what I mean? That's what nobody knows what happened to him. But there's you could go on a tour of the places where he did all his stuff and where he lived and where he hid from the authorities and stuff like that. There was a story where they said that he would put the horseshoe backwards, so it looks like he's going in the opposite direction. There's a whole lot of stories about him, you know, in history books and stuff from when I was a kid, and you heard all those stories. But Pheidon's Hill, I think it's called, or Pheidon's Camp. Yeah, you could still go on tours there and stuff. At least when I was there, you could still do it, and I'm assuming we could still do it now, because that was a pivotal part of Grenadian history, being like a slave uprising. And Julian Pheidon was actually the son of a plantation owner, a white plantation owner, and I don't know if it was a freed black person or a slave, but he was considered a mulatto, is what they called them back then, when you're a mixed race like that.
Early 19th century. In 1833, Grenada became part of the British Windward Islands administration and remained so until 1958. Slavery was abolished in 1834. Nutmeg was introduced in 1843, when a merchant ship called in on its way to England from the East Indies. Late 19th century. In 1857, the first East Indian immigrants arrived. In 1871, Grenada was connected to the telegraph. In 1872, the first secondary school was built. On December 3, 1877, the pure crown colony model replaced Grenada's old representative system of government. On December 3, 1882, the largest wooden jetty ever built in Grenada was opened in Giantdread. In 1885,
it's not Gaiave, it's Guave. Now I see why whenever I watch certain things with these AI voices, that you all get so annoyed, because yeah, I totally get it now. So from here on out, I'm going to try to find videos to react to that doesn't have those AI voices in them.
After Barbados left the British Windward Islands, the capital of the Colonial Confederation was moved from Bridgetown to St. George on Grenada. From 1889 to 1894, the 340-foot Sendall Tunnel was built for horse carriages. Last colonial years 1900 to 1970.
And that Sendall Tunnel is still there and still in use today. And I remember being as tall as I am, walking through there and having to lean over like this. I was always scared going through there. I would avoid it. Now it just goes through this rock, and then go into the main center of the city. On the left-hand side is the hospital that they were talking about, and right on top the hospital is where Fort George is. Man, this is bringing back some memories there, boy.
Before early 20th century. The 1901 census showed that the population of the colony was 63,438. In 1917, T.A. Mary Shaw founded the Representative Government Association to agitate for a new and participative constitutional dispensation for the Grenadian people. Partly as a result of Mary Shaw's.
Also, it's Grenadian, not Grenadian, Grenadian. T.A. Mary Shaw, we learn a lot about him in history. As a matter of fact, there's a college down there with his name on it. So yeah, he was really, really important to Grenadian history.
Lobbying the Wood Commission of 1921 to 1922 concluded that Grenada was ready for constitutional reform in the form of a modified Crown colony government. This modification granted Grenadians from 1925 the right to elect 5 of the 15 members of the Legislative Council, on a restricted property franchise enabling the wealthiest 4% of Grenadian adults to vote. In 1928 electricity was installed in St. George's. In 1943 Pearls Airport was opened. On August 5th,
Now, here's the thing. The electricity was introduced then, and even in the 1970s, in the houses I live in St. George's, they still had some of the old electrical thing. They had a metal chandelier that would shock the crap out of us every time we had to do something, because we didn't have the wall plugins. So if you want to iron your clothes, you had to click it into the light socket. Yeah, oh my God, I remember that stuff. I remember that stuff. I lived in a really old house in the city. It's gone now. About 2 years ago, they tore it down and they put something up there. But yeah, that house was there, a really old house.
1944 the Island Queen schooner disappeared with the loss of all 56 passengers and 11 crew. Towards independence, 1950 to 1974. In 1950, Grenada had its constitution amended to increase the number of elected seats on the Legislative Council from 5 to 8, to be elected by full adult franchise at the 1951 election. In 1950 Eric Gary founded the Grenada United Labour Party, initially as a trade union, which...
Okay. The Grenada United Labour Party, that was my mom's party. E.M. Gary, oh man, he was like the savior of the island to my mom's generation. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to talk about it here. I thought it was in 1951, but there was something called Sky Red, where Gary and his people set the city on blaze, you know. That's another thing too. A lot of the politicians on the island are actually trade unionists, which comes in kind of handy because then they know what the people want, because they were working with the people to begin with. They're not like businessmen and moguls and rich people and stuff like that. They're usually trade unionists that and it was a rite of passage to be a politician, to go through the trade union. For some reason it always worked out like that. Gary was a trade unionist. See, this is history that I'm remembering here, you know what I mean? Because I remember going with my mom to things where Gary was, or seeing Gary in the rum shop knocking back a few rounds with the people and with some of his people and stuff like that. I remember watching him play cricket. I remember being in the top academic standards in the school and getting invited to E.M. Gary having a big luncheon for all the kids that did well in school and stuff like that. I remember that. Yeah. History I remember.
Which led the 1951 general strike for better working conditions. This sparked great unrest. So many buildings were set ablaze that the disturbances became known as the Red Sky Days, and the British authorities had to call in military reinforcements to help regain control of the situation.
My mom told me stories about that. She told me about how, but she called it Sky Red. I think that's what us plebeians called it then, Sky Red, wow. Now I'm having memories of my mom. My mom was definitely, we used to call, his name is E.M. Gary, so people who followed him were called Garyites. So my mom was a Garyite. So was my dad too. My dad was a cop there.
On October 10, 1951, Grenada held its first general elections on the basis of universal adult suffrage. United Labour won 6 of the 8 elected seats on the Legislative Council in both the 1951 and 1954 elections. However, the Legislative Council had few powers at this time, with government remaining fully in the hands of the colonial authorities. On September 22, 1955, Hurricane Janet hit Grenada, killing 500 people and destroying 75% of the nutmeg trees.
My brother and sister, my oldest brother and sister, remembered this year. We were living, I think it was called St. Jules Street is where they were living. And it's up on a hill, and that flooded. They remember it flooding there, and it was up on a hill. You understand what I'm saying? So, yeah, they remembered it. I have never been in a hurricane there. We very rarely get hurricanes there for some reason.
A new political party, the Grenada National Party led by Herbert Blaise, contested the 1957 general election and with the...
Remember that name, Herbert Blaise. Remember that name. That's going to come in handy later on when I'm going to explain that vibe to you all there. But yeah, Herbert Blaise. Man.
Cooperation of elected independent members took control of the Legislative Council from the Grenada United Labour Party. In 1958, the Windward Islands administration was dissolved, and Grenada joined the Federation of the West Indies. In 1960, another constitutional evolution established the post of Chief Minister, making the leader of the majority party in the Legislative Council, which at that time was Herbert Blaise, effective head of government. In March 1961 the Grenada United Labour Party won the general election and George E. Klein became Chief Minister until Eric Gary was elected in a by-election and took the role in August 1961. Also in 1961 the cruise ship the Bianca C caught fire in the St. George's Harbour. All on board were rescued except for the engineer who was fatally burnt. In April 1960,
my mom had stories about that too. And there's a statue right at the beginning of the harbor where that happened. Bianca Bailey. Oh my God, I forgot about that stuff. But, yep. That harbor that I showed you guys there, yeah, you go to the harbor, it's right to the right there, and it's stated that the ocean is really, really, really deep there, but I think that was a myth. I'm not sure.
62 Grenada's administrator, the Queen's representative on the island, James Lloyd suspended the constitution, dissolved the Legislative Council, and removed Eric Gary as Chief Minister, following allegations concerning the Gary's financial impropriety. At the 1962 general election...
See, that there, remember that too. I didn't know he was removed then for improprieties, because that's going to come back to haunt him later. Wow. So that's why that was able to be happening. All right. The revolution and stuff, that is. Let's get going there. I'm learning a little bit more.
And the Grenada National Party won a majority and Herbert Blaise became Chief Minister for the second time. After the Federation of the West Indies collapsed in 1962, the British government tried to form a small federation out of its remaining dependencies in the Eastern Caribbean. Following the failure of this second effort,
No, I think the federation was being pushed heavily by T. Albert Mary show that they referenced earlier, and but apparently the two biggest islands there that was doing pretty well for themselves, Trinidad and Jamaica, didn't want to be part of the federation, and I think that's why it fell apart.
The British and the islanders developed the concept of associated statehood. Under the West Indies Act on March 3, 1967, Grenada was granted full autonomy over its internal affairs. Herbert Blaise was the first premier of the associated state of Grenada from March to August 1967. Eric Gary served as premier from August 1967 until February 1974, as the Grenada United Labour Party won majorities in both the 1967 and 1972 general elections. Independence, Revolution and U.S. invasion, 1974 to 1983.
I lived through this
Independence.
part, you know.
On February 7, 1974, Grenada became a fully independent state. Grenada continued to practice a modified Westminster parliamentary system based on the British model with a Governor-General appointed by and representing the British monarch and a Prime Minister who is both leader of the majority party and the head of government.
De Gale.
Eric Gary was independent Grenada's first Prime Minister serving.
The guy that was the Governor General when I was younger was De Gale. Then there was Paul Spoon. Or was it Paul Spoon? Okay, here's a part of our history that they didn't mention. In 1970, Jennifer Hostin won the Miss World pageant. That was a big deal in the island because I think she was one of the first Caribbean people to win or the first, more than likely, to win the Miss World pageant.
From 1974 until his overthrow in 1979. Gary won re-election in Grenada's first general election as an independent state in 1976. However, the opposition New Jewel movement refused to recognize the result, claiming the poll was fraudulent.
Okay, the New Jewel movement, I know I'm breaking it up, the New Jewel movement was the Young People Party. They were deemed communists, you know what I mean? So that caused a lot of dissension there, especially because the Cold War was in full swing then. But it was led by Morris Bishop, Bernard Code, Strawn, Jackie Kraft, and some of the people that was part of it, I actually went to secondary school with, you know what I mean? Played soccer with them, played cricket with them and thing, you know. No, so, you know, I was part of that history there, so.
And so began working towards the overthrow of the Gary regime by revolutionary means. In 1976, St. George's University was established. The 1979 coup and revolutionary government. On March 13, 1979, the New Jewel movement launched an armed revolution which removed Gary, suspended the constitution, and established a people's revolutionary government, headed by Maurice Bishop, who declared himself prime minister. His Marxist-Leninist government established close ties with Cuba, Nicaragua, and other communist bloc countries. All political parties except for the New...
You see, that's the thing, man. They always drop that communist vibe in there. Maybe it's because I was young. And there was a lot of guns on the island then. I ain't gonna lie, boy. Everybody and their brother had a gun. There were young people walking around with like Russian-made guns on the holsters on the side. See, you all say AK-47. For some reason, we call it the AK. I don't know why, but that's what we call it, the AK. There was anti-aircraft guns. There was armored cars. I lived in I lived in a valley. And it's not like a deep valley, but it's like a rolling type of valley. And then another valley. And the main road was out there. And they would have like military maneuvers in the soccer field on the other side. And at night you can hear, you know what I mean? Right around all the houses, because I lived in one village, and you go up the hill and there's a village right there. And I remember seeing people that I know and stuff up there with their guns, boy, you know, you know, it's just crazy. I know I'm smiling, but it was kind of unnerving back then. Whose side was I on? I really didn't mind the revolution, because when they came, okay, before that, to go to school, you had to pay a fee. They made all schools free. They started the CPE, Center for Popular Education, where people who didn't finish school, you go out into the young people went out into the hill and the mountains and stuff of the island and educate people. You know what I mean? So yeah, but it was a tumultuous time. You know, there was like bomb blasts. The military was saying that people are trying to form a counter-revolution, so they end up shooting a bunch and killing some people, not a bunch, but some people. So it was kind of tumultuous there. But for some reason, I don't remember being scared. I do not remember being afraid. Because I used to walk the streets at night, even when they had blackouts. You know, they would have this time where the whole island just went black, all electricity all over the island. And sometimes I would be caught in the city of St. George, and I lived down in Grenada, and so I had to walk home because we didn't have public transportation and stuff that ran late and stuff like that. So if you stay in the city till like 9 at night, you gotta walk home. You know what I mean? So, and sometimes I'd be walking home and then poof. And there'd be soldiers out there, you know, and they'd be checking, you know what I mean? I remember one night I'm walking home, and I got to a place called the Roundabout. Whew. All the lights went out. Next thing I know, I'm laying on my stomach, and somebody was, what are you doing out here now? What's going on? And it was a woman. And she had an AK-47 on me. Of course, they let me go, you know what I mean? And now, yeah, I'm still here. But I still don't remember being scared. I still don't remember being scared.
New Jewel movement were banned and no elections were held during the 4 years of PRG rule. The 1983 coups. On October 14, 1983, a power struggle within Bishop's ruling party ended with his house arrest. His erstwhile friend and rival, Deputy Prime Minister, Bernard Coard, briefly became head of government. This coup precipitated demonstrations in various parts of the island, which eventually led to Bishop being freed from arrest by an impassioned crowd of his loyal supporters on October 19, 1983.
See, I remember that. I remember that to a T, man. It's just a mass of people went up to the house where they were holding him under house arrest because they had put him under house arrest. And they took him from there. And I remember all these people just, you know, all that chanting and stuff going on. If only they knew what was to come next.
Bishop was soon recaptured by Grenadian soldiers loyal to the Coard faction and executed along with 7 others, including 3 members of the cabinet. That same day the Fort George, that's where they went. And with Fort George is one way up and one way out. And that's where they took him, and I guess they took them there because that was the headquarters for the police, and at the time I knew the People's Revolutionary Army. So I figured they went up there to get arms to ward off the military that was coming, you know, because a lot of the military sided with Coard. And that's where he was executed. And purportedly, there was a woman in the mix there too. Her name was Jackie Crepp, and she was said to have been pregnant at the time when she was shot, disintegrated. You know, nobody knows what they did with their bodies or anything like that. The thing about that is, behind that Fort George is like a 40-foot drop, maybe more than that. And there was no way out. So when the soldiers advanced on Fort George, which was called Fort Rupert then, in honor of Maurice Bishop's father, who was shot and killed during a demonstration before 1979. And a lot of people jumped off this 40-foot drop. And I remember seeing the smoke bellowing out of the fort and stuff like that, and you could hear the screams of the people and all that. And still I wasn't scared. Why wasn't I scared? Okay, let's keep going here. Grenadian military under General Hudson Austin took power in a second coup and formed a military government to run the country. A 4-day total curfew was declared, under which any civilian outside their home was subject to summary execution.
Oh yeah, well, do I remember that? See, my mom was already living in America when this happened. And I was on the island with my oldest brother and my other brother, who still lives on the island right now. But everybody was out of the village. That was my family member. So I was alone at the house when all of this started. I didn't know where my brothers were. I didn't know if they were okay. I didn't know anything. And I remember staying in that house by myself. The electricity was off. And I remember everybody in the village would come out to the main road and was looking, and we'd hear a jeep go coming down with soldiers, and we'd run inside because General Austin said any civilian, like he said, outside would be shot on sight. Because here's the thing, most of the people, most of the population loved Maurice Bishop. They loved Maurice Bishop. So he was like, yeah, we gonna have to, keep them under wraps. So they come out shot on sight. And I was in that house by myself. It was more of an adrenaline rush and a little excitement more so than being scared. Yeah. People running and screaming when those jeeps go by. I did get caught out there a couple of times, you know what I mean? As a jeep coming up. But then it's people I knew that was driving by in the jeep, so they just say, "Hey man," and they just keep going. Nobody shot. Maybe that's why I wasn't scared, you know what I mean? But you know, I got caught out there away from my house a couple of times. And the guys in the jeep just waved.
Invasion. A U.S. Caribbean force invaded Grenada on October 25, 1983, in an action called Operation Urgent Fury, and swiftly defeated the Grenadian forces and their Cuban allies. During the
Okay, let's talk about that a second. Now that's when I was scared. That's when I got scared. And the thing that scared me the most is I was in the house one morning, 6 a.m. Tuesday, October the 25th. And I heard this like loud roaring noise. It's like, what in the blazes is this? You know what I mean? And it sounded like the end of the world. It really did. And I remember walking up in front door and looking up into the sky because the noise was like everywhere. This roaring noise was everywhere, and this plane was going by, and there was people falling out of it. No, I've seen stuff like that in the movies, but I've never seen that in real life. And these people would come down in the parachutes. I believe it was the 82nd Airborne, and they were shooting anti-aircraft guns at them. So you would hear these anti-aircraft guns, and we call them the elephant because of the noise they make. So, oh yeah, there was a full-scale war type situation going on. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. And I remember sitting in my veranda watching that. I was terrified then. For one, that big old noise really terrified me. And the gunfire was angrier, it seemed, than any other type of gunfire I've heard, and maybe because of the sheer magnitude of it. But yeah.
Fighting 45 Grenadians, 25 Cubans, and 19 Americans were killed. This action was taken in response to an appeal obtained from the Governor General and to a request for assistance from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, without consulting the island's head of state, Queen Elizabeth II, Commonwealth institutions or other usual diplomatic channels. Furthermore, United States government military strategists feared that Soviet use of the island would enable the Soviet Union to project tactical power over the entire Caribbean region. U.S. citizens were evacuated, and constitutional government was resumed. The United States gave $48.4 million in economic assistance to Grenada in 1984. In 1986, members of the PRG and the PRA were criminally tried for civil.
Okay, before you continue there, I remember I told you guys in the beginning, remember Herbert Blaze, who was the premier? They put him back in power then. The man could barely walk. I remember as a young kid, nobody wanted him. But I remember he was, I lived close to the airport. That's where they were parachuting in. And I remember him coming in a motorcade. And we used to call him breakdance because of his like jerky movements and stuff like that. And I remember us young hooligans, if you want to call us that, stopping the traffic and breakdancing to mock him and stuff like that. You know what I mean? We stopped the motorcade, you know what I mean? The only other Caribbean forces I remember being there was the Jamaicans, because the Jamaicans were the loudest and the most forceful of the forces. The Caribbean forces, that is. I think there were Barbadians there and some other islands, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if there was any Trinidadians there, but...
Civilian killings associated with the October 19th coup. 14, including Cord and his wife, Phyllis, were sentenced to death for actions related to the murder of 11 people including Maurice Bishop. 3 other defendants, all PRA soldiers, were convicted of the lesser charge of manslaughter and sentenced to 30 or more years. The convicted prisoners,
the 3 that they talk about, I went to school with them. My brothers went to school with them. And they're all still alive, actually. I haven't seen them guys in years, boy. Okay, let's keep going.
came to be known as the Grenada 17, and the subject of an ongoing international campaign for their release. In 1991, all the murder sentences were commuted to life imprisonment. In October 2003, Amnesty International issued a report which stated that their trial had been gross violation of international standards governing the fairness of trials. In 2009, the last 7 prisoners were released after serving 26 years. Democracy restored, 1983 to present day.
Now, here's the thing about that. A lot of the guys that were in prison, they actually ended up getting college degrees and stuff, became lawyers and stuff, some of them. They should be in their like mid to late 60s now. Ah, man, that thing just seems like it was yesterday. Zoombakes, Headache. I know their real names, but I know their nicknames. Mohammed. Man, I haven't thought about those guys in a long time.
Post-invasion politics. When U.S. troops withdrew from Grenada in December 1983, Nicholas Braithwaite was appointed Prime Minister of an interim administration by the Governor-General Sir Paul Scoon until elections could be organized. On October 28, 1984, the new Point Salines International Airport was opened, which enabled Grenada to receive large commercial jets for the first time. The first democratic election since 1976.
No, earlier they mentioned Paul's Airport. That's the airport my mom used when she came to America. I used the Point Salines Airport when I came to America. Back then, there was no straight flights. I had to stop off in Barbados and then take another flight to come here. I don't remember much of that though. I don't know why. I don't remember much of that. When I landed in America, that's when my memory from there on is quite photogenic.
Were held in December 1984 and were won by the Grenada National Party under Herbert Blaise, who won 14 out of 15 seats in elections and served as Prime Minister until his death in December 1989. The NNP continued in power until 1989 but with a reduced majority. 5 NNP parliamentary members, including 2 cabinet ministers, left the party in 1986-87 and formed the National Democratic Congress, which became the official opposition. In August 1989, Prime Minister Blaise broke with the GNP to form another new party, the National Party, from the ranks of the NNP. This split in the NNP resulted in the formation of a minority government until constitutionally scheduled elections in March 1990. Prime Minister Blaise died in December 1989 and was succeeded as Prime Minister by Ben Jones until after the 1990 elections. The National Democratic Congress emerged from the 1990 elections as the strongest party, winning 7 of the 15 available seats. Nicholas Braithwaite added 2 TNP members and 1 member of the Grenada United Labour Party to create a 10-seat majority coalition. The Governor-General appointed him to be Prime Minister for a second time. Braithwaite resigned in February 1995 and was succeeded as Prime Minister by George Brizan, who served until the June 1995 election.
I know him too, George
In
Brizan.
parliamentary elections on June 20, 1995, the NNP won 8 of the 15 seats and formed a government headed by Keith Mitchell. The NNP maintained and affirmed its hold on power when it took all 15 parliamentary seats in the January 1999 elections. Mitchell went on to win the 2003 elections with a reduced majority of 8 of the 15 seats and served as Prime Minister for a record 13 years until his defeat in 2008. The 2001 census showed that the population of Grenada was 100,895. The 2008 election was won by the National Democratic Congress under Tillman Thomas with 11 of the 15 seats. In 2009, Point Salines International Airport was renamed Maurice Bishop International Airport in tribute to the former Prime Minister. Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In 2002, much of the controversy of the late 1970s and early 1980s was once again brought into the public consciousness with the opening of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The commission was chaired by a Catholic priest, Father Mark Haynes, and was tasked with uncovering injustices arising from the PRA, Bishop's regime, and before. It held a...
Now here's the thing about a lot of the guys that was in the PRA and all of that, they actually went to a Catholic secondary school called the Presentation Brothers College. That's how I played cricket with them and stuff. I used to go up to the Presentation College. They had a court up there, tennis court and stuff, basketball court. I do believe they put that in later. But we used to go play cricket on that court with them. And they all kind of lived in that area too. Some a little bit further out. After the revolution, I didn't really see them that much.
A number of hearings around the country. The commission was formed because of a school project. Brother Robert Fanovich, head of Presentation Brothers College in St. George's, tasked some of his senior students with conducting a research project into the era and specifically into the fact that Maurice Bishop's body was never discovered. Their project attracted a great deal of attention, including from the Miami Herald, and the final report was published in a book written by the boys called Big Sky, Little Bullet. It also uncovered that there was still a lot of resentment in Grenadian society resulting from the era, and a feeling that there were many injustices still unaddressed. The commission began shortly after the boys concluded their project. Hurricane Ivan. On September 7, 2004, Grenada was hit directly by Category 4 Hurricane Ivan. The hurricane destroyed about 85% of the structures on the island, including the prison and the Prime Minister's residence, killed 39 people, and destroyed most of the nutmeg crop, Grenada's economic mainstay. Grenada's economy was set back several years by Hurricane Ivan's impact. Hurricane Emily ravaged the island's north end in June 2005.
So yeah, did the island rebuild after that? Yeah, definitely. I spoke to my brother, and he told me, that was like last year, sometime he told me that Grenada had the 7th best economy in the Caribbean right now. We have a new prime minister. He's in his 40s, but he looks like he's in his 20s. And apparently he's for the people, and he's always looking out for the people and doing things for the people. So they're quite satisfied with him. So it's not some old dude that's going to try to keep up the old ways that's not working anymore. It's a young guy. You know what I mean? But the thing about history, see how tumultuous the history was? Unfortunately, that's what a lot of us have in common. Like, Romania, Serbia, Ireland, maybe not at the same magnitude, but human reaction to it is the same. The fear, the confusion, all that uncertainty. That's a lot of years to go through that, you know what I'm saying? And it seems like it's all happens, and then we pretty much end up in the same spot we were before anyway. But if it's one thing we have in common, is that we're human. Most of us work paycheck to paycheck. Most of us want peace. Most of us just want to hang out with our family and enjoy life, travel, learn about each other. Think about that. I hope you guys enjoyed this reaction. If you like the reaction, drop a like on it. comment in the comment section, ask me questions there, and I'll respond to it. And share the video, let people know about Grenada, just as well they would know about Romania, Serbia, Slovenia, Bulgaria, any other place that are reactor. Share it so that we could know each other, because knowing each other is the first step into understanding each other. And someone has said before that, you don't get to know about stuff by YouTube videos. No, but it's a start. Like Bob Marley say, one drop, ripple effect. See what I'm saying? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. In the meantime, y'all take care of each other, all right? Cool runnings.